Welcome, and thank you for joining PwC for today's webcast. Before getting started, we'd like to take a moment to highlight some important administrative matters covering today's session. The Action Center, located on the bottom of your screen, is where you can find the presentation slides available for download, as well as the ability to ask questions during the live webcast. Should you experience any technical difficulties during the webcast, such as slides not progressing or inability to answer polling questions, please refresh your browser. If you are unable to answer polling questions live, the QA box can be used to answer for CPE credit, as long as you also include the polling question number. Please also note, you can earn 1 CPE credit for this webcast. In order to receive these CPE credits, you must be present for the entire webcast and also respond to each of the live polling questions that will appear on your screen. Upon conclusion, you will automatically be notified whether or not you have qualified for CPE credit. If qualified, you will be able to download your certificate immediately. You may also return to the webcast console to download your certificate for up to 90 days after the conclusion of the live presentation. Finally, you will also be prompted to complete a short survey at the end of the webcast, and we welcome any feedback or suggestions you might have. At this time, I would like to hand it over to our PwC moderator. Enjoy the broadcast.
Howdy, and welcome to PwC's Year-End Audit Committee webcast. I'm Stephen Parker, a partner in PwC's Governance Insight Center. It's great to have you all with us today. I know it's a busy time of year. We're in that magical stretch where the holiday season is beginning, year-end is in full swing, and for some of us, college football has given us more heartburn than the out-of-date eggnog ever could. As a Texas A&M fan, I can tell you, the only thing more unpredictable than today's regulatory environment is an SEC football season. But just like any good team, we've got a strong lineup for you today. And we're going to cover a lot of ground for you as you prepare for year-end and beyond. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to kick things off with an economic outlook, looking at the macro forces shaping board agendas heading into 2026. Then we'll blitz into regulatory updates, touching on the latest from the SEC, the PCAOB, and sustainability developments. After that, we'll audible into AI insights, including what directors and executives are really grappling with as they think about risk, opportunity, and governance. Next, we'll tackle what I like to call the kitchen sink session, everything from risk to efficiency and effectiveness to talent and succession planning. And finally, we'll wrap up with our internal audit uplift discussion, a topic top of mind for chief audit executives and audit committees as they continue to look for how to enhance the value of internal audit in the year ahead. And be sure to stay with us until the very end. You'll get to earn your 1.5 CPE credits, and we'll have a special announcement you won't want to miss. Consider it our holiday gift to close out the webcast. So settle in and let's get started. Kathy, you won the coin toss, so you're up first.
Thank you, Stephen. And I want to welcome Natalie, and I'm going to hopefully get this right, Yakinich, right, from PwC's intelligence team. So Natalie sounds very CIA-ish. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what the intelligence team here at PwC focuses on.
Well, Kathy, I could tell you, but I might have to kill you afterwards.
Please don't.
No, I'm just joking. Our team it's an internal team. We do a lot of data-driven analysis of the geopolitical landscape, macroeconomic, globally, US, and the markets, both kind of the markets PwC plays in, but also the financial markets, to really help inform our senior leaders when they're making decisions.
Gotcha. And you also periodically meet with our clients. You met with a couple of my clients over the last couple months.
That's right.
In the chemical sector.
That's right. We also get out and get to meet with clients as well.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, today we want to talk a little bit about the economic outlook. Okay, so we'll focus our time there because this is a time of year where directors, not
financial markets, to really help inform our senior leaders when they're making decisions.
Gotcha. And you also periodically meet with our clients. You met with a couple of my clients over the last couple months.
That's right.
In the chemical sector.
That's right. We also get out and get to meet with clients as well.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, today we want to talk a little bit about the economic outlook. Okay, so we'll focus our time there because this is a time of year where directors and audit committees are focused on year-end financial statement presentation, significant assumptions, and they'll also be talking about the outlook for 26 as well. So with that, what's the U.S. outlook look like? And I'm sure it's going to be really easy for you to share this in a few minutes.
Of course, super easy, super easy. So I think I would start with just setting the stage for 25 at the headline level has shown a lot of resilience in the US. Despite that kind of headline level of resilience, I think we're dealing with what could be a broad set of outcomes in 26. And so, I say to my team, and they laugh a lot, it could go up unless it goes down. So it's a little bit lighthearted, but really, quite honestly, economics is an imperfect profession. And today we're dealing with a lot of structural forces that, if not overriding, are redefining kind of the traditional business cycles. And I'll kind of hit on 3 big forces that we're thinking about today. So the first one is really, you can't really talk about the US economy without talking about AI. And how AI moves from kind of this investment and build out phase into a broader deployment and diffusion phase is going to matter for how the US economy also evolves. So in 25, I think what you saw was a lot of business investment, whether from the hyperscalers or from just general corporates investing in tech, really drove some of that economic growth. Kind of questions over what it's meant for GDP numbers, but it's definitely been a role in kind of some of that economic growth. On the other side, economics is really looking at AI in terms of like driving productivity gains. It's what we're looking on for like driving economic growth without those inflationary pressures. The most bullish economists in their outlooks really are banking on that kind of productivity. So how this evolves from this kind of investment phase to more of a productivity, broadly speaking phase, it's going to matter for what the economy looks like. Secondly, I would kind of hit on trade policy. It's been top of mind for everyone, pretty much all of this.
Right.
When we look at surveys and when we kind of listen to financial executives talk about their corporate clients, we get that sense that, at least from large corporates, executives feel like maybe they have a little bit more clarity, maybe a little bit more comfort with navigating trade policy. Having said that, we think there's still a lot of uncertainty. So first off, we still have a Supreme Court decision that we're all still waiting on. How that plays out is also going to impact how the administration responds.
Right.
We still have USMCA that needs to be renegotiated in 2026. So that's one of our biggest trading partners. So how that plays out is also going to have an impact. And then I would say, yes, we do have these trade frameworks in place, but how much clarity and how much certainty they provide, we're not really sure. So we're kind of left with looking at, we're not really sure where the administration will land in finality with trade policy. We're not really sure where in the process of pass-through we are. So how much of the cost are corporates retaining? How much are they passing on to the end customer? And that's really going to impact kind of that inflationary outlook for the US economy. Finally, I think I would hit on fiscal tailwinds. So for a while, we've been talking about business investment and how they're only focusing on tech. It's a little bit of the case last year too. So we're not quite sure if AI is crowding out other things, or if companies just had nothing better to invest in, AI came in, gave them something to focus on, or how much of this is policy uncertainty. There's a lot of hope resting on the one big beautiful bill with kind of depreciation, expense provisions, maybe broadening out the what businesses are investing in. So kind of those are the three big forces. Underneath those, we kind of talk about these conundrums, as my team calls them, and that they're these, and as you and I have discussed, these segments, some of them big in the economy, that are really struggling, even though the headline speaks of resilience. Housing, low-income consumers, parts of commercial real estate outside of data centers, chemicals, as you and I have discussed, trucking. There are segments that continue to struggle, even with GDP numbers that are pretty good. And there's no clear answers, at least at the macro level when we look at it, as to what it takes to turn those sectors around.
Right. So inconsistency across sectors.
Inconsistency, that's
the potential for even a more volatile 26 as it relates to tariffs.
We're not resting on our laurels.
That's right. So we have a scenario where the Supreme Court could rule them unconstitutional. We have a scenario where there could be new trade negotiations taking place. So I think what's the advice to committees at this point when they think about those types of policies?
We would say we've been looking for this state of normalization, but agility is really key. Keep your scenario planning wide, plan for a wide range of outcomes so that you can pivot if necessary.
The word I keep hearing is recalibration.
Recalibration, that's right.
At all times. That's great. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the areas that you focused on. Unemployment, interest rates. Everyone's always interested in interest rates. So can you talk about some of those variables?
Of course, happy to. So I'll start with kind of the labor market, because that's an area that we spent a lot of time really thinking about, because it is unusual for the labor market to be kind of having no momentum as it does today. Again, back to that headline resilience, given the GDP numbers that we're getting. Usually what happens is you might have the Fed raising rates, unemployment starts to rise slowly, something breaks, a price shock, a credit crisis, and that leads to broad layoffs. Fed can kind of come in, lower rates, and it kind of restarts our cycle. Today, we've had this kind of low fire environment where we've had 30 months of very slowly rising unemployment. And kind of jobs as of September, on average, we were adding about 62,000. So that's close to almost nothing this economy is adding. So on the one hand, there's a lot of discussion over supply. Between immigration slowing down, baby boomers retiring, there's a lot of questions over how many jobs does the economy actually need to add to kind of employ everyone that wants a job. But we think there's certainly a demand issue happening too. Whether it's policy uncertainty or something else, there's definitely discussion around hiring freezes over the summer after kind of the tariff policy announcements in April. So what are some of the things that we're watching? So we're watching that new entrants are struggling to find jobs. That's kind of one of the reasons behind the slow rise in unemployment. So we're worried about is there a skills mismatch happening where the folks coming into the labor force are not the ones that the employers need? It's narrow. So most of the job growth was happening in healthcare in the past year, which means if you lose your job in another sector, you might really struggle to find a new job. So then we worry about kind of rising long-term unemployment. And then is there skills erosion happening then? And then we look at kind of youth unemployment. And that's been rising since 23. So there's some kind of thoughts that maybe that's due to AI, but just given the length of time, it's harder to tell what is really driving that kind of rise again. But it's so important to the future of the labor market that kind of that 16 to 25 demographic is landing jobs to start their career.
Completely agree. Yeah. So interest rates. Okay, so we are always wanting to know what's going to happen with interest rates. It's one of those bigger assumptions, if you will, directors will be looking at as they look to 26. What do you think?
So it's one of my favorite topics. I know, I'm very boring. So I'll touch very briefly on inflation because I think you kind of need to have the labor piece and the inflation
100%.
piece to talk about rates. So inflation, kind of when we entered this year, 25, we were making progress to that 2% Fed target. So you kind of felt like maybe they were locked and loaded on what they were doing with rate policy. And then kind of when new trade policy started to come in, kind of April, May timeframe, inflation started to move higher. So it's moving in the wrong direction. Not as severely as economists expected. You know, some of the good side importers, producers, they're moving slower in that pass-through of price. So it hasn't been quite as severe as folks expected, but it's not cooperating.
Right.
On the other side, the one that we worry about is services. It's still looking okay, but if it starts to bleed into services, that's a stickier form of inflation. Shelter still providing some nice tailwinds. So there's some positives for inflation, but for now it's not cooperating. And so that kind of leads us to, labor and inflation. That's the Fed's dual mandate.
Right.
So you have a labor market that's not broken, but it's got no momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation that's not spiking higher, but it's not really cooperating either.
Right.
So they're dual mandates in tension.
Right.
So they have a problem with that kind of both sides of the equation. It's leading to dissent at the Fed where there's disagreement over which side requires more attention. And that is the difference between cutting rates and not cutting rates.
Right.
They're also a data dependent organization that is just now restarting to get data. And we're in December. They have a meeting next week. We're just getting September data. So we're really lagging in kind of the outlook that they're looking for. So they have a few issues at the Fed in terms of determining kind of the path of policy. Lastly, I would say, at least for our team, we really question the efficacy of monetary policy, which we think makes it difficult for them. Lower rates are supposed to drive demand, but you're kind of seeing slow hiring, even at industries that are performing well, like financial services. So we're not sure that rate cuts is really going to drive a restart to hiring.
Okay.
Some of the rate-sensitive sectors, we're not quite sure how much lower rates are going to help them. And I'll give an example, housing. It's got affordability issues. The lower rates would help, but they're not going to solve those affordability issues. And you still have hangovers from the zero rate era.
Right.
So a lot of people sitting in like 3% mortgages. Rates would have to fall quite dramatically to get those people moving.
Got it.
On the other side, and kind of Chairman Powell has talked about this as well, AI investment is fairly rate insensitive. So kind of no matter what they do, I don't know how much it changes the outlook for AI investment. And lastly, the Fed does not focus on asset markets, but they have to be aware, we think, that there's a lot of discussion around bubbles, whether it's equity markets, credit markets, and if they're cutting rates into bubble-like conditions, do they potentially stoke the fire of further amplifying risks there? And that's just the short end of the curve. I haven't even touched on the long end, whether it's 5, 7, 10-year treasuries. And that's where a lot of corporates borrow, commercial real estate. That's what drives mortgage rates. Fed influences, they certainly don't control. So even just as we were kind of talking this morning, yesterday there was news that rising yields in Japan might be spilling over into our US Treasury markets because a lot of flows have come from Japan into our Treasury markets. So there's a lot of other forces that are really making it difficult to say that we can definitely bet on lower rates in 2026.
Got it. So can we quickly cover the global economic outlook? Because we have a lot of directors that are joining us today that serve on the board of global companies. Okay, so maybe just a couple minutes on the global outlook.
So I'll keep it super quick.
Okay.
Of course, the US is still the largest economy. We are the largest consumer. As we go, it will matter for the globe. But we do still think we've gone kind of walls up in our policies. And that is going to impact, it's going to broaden out performance. So after the global financial crisis, there was this idea of US exceptionalism. And it ended with, in 24, we were 70% of the world equity indices. That's really unsustainable for a country that's only 24% of global GDP. So I think we're looking for parts of the world to outperform against the US and for performance to broaden out. But again, as we've kind of discussed, whether it's China, Japan, Europe, I'm sure everybody knows a lot of these kind of themes. They're all grappling with their own tailwinds and headwinds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So super challenging, super challenging. All right, so this is a time of year where boards are taking a look at the 26 outlook, okay, and they're going to be they're as part of their oversight role, they're going to be looking at this year's budget. What are the kind of things they should be thinking about in terms of challenging some of those assumptions management might bring to them?
So yeah, that's right. So as we discussed with these kind of like big conundrums underneath the surface of resilience, what we spend a lot of time doing and what we recommend is really go below the aggregates.
Right.
So we say GDP is not necessarily a reflection of how a particular business might actually feel the economy on the ground. So for example, very briefly, consumer. It might look great at the headline level that consumer spend's been pretty resilient, but we spend a lot of time thinking about demographics, credit tiers. How is consumer spending shifting across those credit tiers and demographics? It sounds a little bit trite, but we do say, like, you got to really know your customer, who's walking in your door, and is that who you want walking in your door? So for our team, like, in addition to the headline levels, we're looking at credit card portfolios at banks and how they're performing, delinquency rates across products, across credit spectrums, to get a better sense of like the deeper story of the consumer. Industrials is kind of a similar story. End markets today are very, very different. Aerospace, defense, kind of data center linked, those are pretty healthy. But as you and I have discussed, chemicals, it's tougher out there. Trucking, it's tougher. So we, again, say, go below the aggregates. We're looking at freight volumes, port volumes, anything that's going to give us kind of like that sector-specific lens, because we know that the headline number isn't really giving us the full story. And then I would say, just lastly, it's not really about this divergence, but we think folks have gotten really comfortable, really since the GFC, of it's been a falling rate environment. We've been close to zero.
Yeah.
And I think the natural inclination is, well, I can always assume that rates are going to fall. I think that's a dangerous assumption. I'm not here saying that rates are going to spike next year. I don't really have that crystal ball, but I think corporates do need to be ready. And so you do really need to stress test capital planning on the expectation of, well, what if we do get surprised again? We don't think we're done with the surprises on the rate side. We think that the structural kind of tailwind of falling rates, it's behind us. We're done with that world.
Gotcha. So maybe advice to committee members is scenarios, right? Think about the scenarios, stress test some of those assumptions. And I always think about financing, right? In terms of, if I'm a director, I want to make sure that the company is ready to go. Okay, when and if those rates are ideal.
Exactly.
Right. And what you're saying is, don't anticipate a lower rate environment. That may not happen.
Exactly. Don't plan that like you're going to be able to refi at a lower rate next year, because you might never get that opportunity.
That's great. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today. Fabulous. Stephen, I would say we at least got a first down for you, okay, in terms of our football terminology. So with that, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it back to Stephen. Thank you.
Kathy and Natalie, thank you so much. And Kathy, I'm really proud of you for getting that the football theme here. I don't think we talked about that in planning at all. You summarized things pretty good. I had jotted a couple things down. Just I can't get into some of the specifics. It was so great in terms of the number of really nuggets you gave them, but some key words that I kind of jotted down and underlined: resilience in 2025, certainly continued uncertainty as we move forward with just about everything that Natalie was talking about. I love the word recalibration, and scenario planning has to continue. And the good news is, you guys are getting good at that. We've been doing it for a while, and I know we can continue that. So the current regulatory environment is a lot like Texas weather. If you don't like it now, give it a couple hours and it'll change. To help us navigate all that's going on is my colleague, Tracy Lee Brown, and my partner, Kyle Moffitt. You're familiar with them both. They've done this segment, I think, for the last 3 years, and what we're hoping for this year is they get it right. So with Tracy, I'm passing it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome back, Kyle. We're already starting off laughing.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Kyle, as you know, I recently moved to California, and I traded the cold weather of New York for some sunshine, but I can't escape the flurry of regulatory activity. What's going on?
Definitely a flurry. And look, on the East Coast, right? Obviously cold and snowing right now. The regulatory environment is even hotter. So a lot of, I think, for us to cover what late breaking news this morning. Chairman Atkins from the SEC actually was over at the New York Stock Exchange, rang the bell. He published an op-ed, an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. I encourage people to take a look at that. Interestingly, one of the signs that I saw and I showed you earlier before this was make IPOs great again. So it obviously a lot of what they're going to be focused on the coming months and years will be to encourage capital formation.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. And so, let's get into our annual update and let's see if we can throw in some cheesy weather puns while we
I'll try.
So starting off with the SEC's Spring 2025 agenda, it looks different, right? We knew that a new SEC means new items that will be added. And one specific item is the rationalization of disclosure practices.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? And I think it will feed into this capital formation as well.
I might try to make some predictions. I'm known to get my predictions wrong, but I guess as a weatherman today, it's fine, right? Because it's perfectly acceptable to get the weather wrong, which they continuously do. Look, I think as you think about what this commission is going to focus on, you do have Chairman Atkins, who is going to focus on, I believe, simplifying, refining existing disclosure requirements. They've talked a lot about materiality of disclosures, right? Understanding that over time, the commission and Congress, they've layered disclosure requirements on top of existing ones, and it's created this kind of patchwork of various disclosures. And so, obviously, I think they're going to refocus on material information, try to reduce the non-material duplicative disclosures that we've seen and heard them talk about for years and years. They've also talked about revisiting the frequency and format of periodic reporting, simplifying, all the voluminous disclosures. I think about like executive compensation, right? That he has even called a Frankenstein patchwork of disclosures.
Oh, okay.
And that has evolved since like the 70s. So a lot there. And then of course, scaling back the ESG, the climate related disclosures. And so I think we'll certainly see them focus more, I believe, on financial material disclosures. And they've talked about this publicly. And so I do see a change in the reporting climate.
Okay. And so can you talk a little bit more about this quarterly versus half-yearly reporting? Does this feed into the rationalization?
It does. And I think, look, the conversations that I've been part of, it's the things that I've heard, it's things I've seen in statements from various commissioners, including, Chairman Atkins. It is possible that we do see something on the periodic reporting, right? Okay. They're talking about, hey, you look back to the first Trump term, Trump tweeted at the SEC and said quarterly reporting is dumb. I've asked the SEC to revisit it, take a look at it. Well, he did the same thing in 2025, and so he a few months ago did the same thing. And Chairman Atkins has basically said, we're going to do something about it, right? It fell off the agenda during the Biden administration, and now it's back on. The question is, what does it look like? I think that as I think about most rule changes or changes like this that are that impactful, I think about you're going to have a proposing release, you'll have period of comments, time for people to comment, and then have an adopting rule, a final rule. And that could take time, but certainly it's something they could get done by the end of 2026 if they really wanted to. Now, I think, though, the other thing I've heard, the possibility of issuing an exemptive order. So you think about the executive orders that Trump has issued. Well, the commission has the ability to issue an exemptive order. So they could revisit and look at the reporting requirements for certain classes of issuers. So think of an emerging growth company, smaller reporting company, and essentially provide some sort of exemption from reporting on a quarterly basis and give optionality to quarterly reporting. Now, whether that's a broad stroke they do for all public companies remains to be seen. But I do think it's going to be on their agenda. They're going to do something. The scale of it, I think, it's just going to depend.
Okay. So here's my cheesy weather pun. I'd say with all of these changes, companies may want to pack an umbrella because the reporting forecast is calling for some shifting conditions.
There you go. And then here's mine. It may feel like it's raining ducks and chickens. It's definitely foul weather.
So sorry about that. So
sorry about mine.
Yeah. So another change at the SEC related to shareholder proposals. So not audit committee specific, but a big thing that happened in the governance world. And I think we definitely need to just touch on that real quick. So in November, the SEC basically gave companies to exclude most shareholder proposals from their proxy statements. Without having to receive permission from the SEC to do so first, right? And so just a little bit of background. When a shareholder files a proposal to be included in a company's annual meeting ballot, companies can request from the SEC, let's exclude this so that it doesn't go to vote. And so the November announcement essentially just says, right, you don't have to come to us, you may go ahead and exclude it. I mean, I think that this is a big thing for sure, because while these proposals are non-binding and symbolic, it has shaped governance practices over the years, right? And so I think it's definitely, we don't know whether companies will take advantage of this, but something for us to put on our weather map and to look forward to with this proxy season.
Definitely a polarizing issue, I'd say. Can I have some of that?
Please go ahead. Just don't mess on your white shirt over there. And so let's move on to enforcement.
Yeah.
So last year we were sitting here and we said that enforcement could look different under a new SEC.
Yeah.
So does it look different?
It does. I think, look, we've not heard a lot from the new enforcement director yet. And obviously that's the impact of the government shutdown. So, I think that is obviously delayed a lot. So I think when in the coming months, when we start to see, public commentary, when we see some of the enforcement actions they've been bringing, we'll have a better flavor for kind of what companies should be thinking about. But I think what we have heard is that I'm very jealous because I have water in here. What we have heard, right, is there's a new enforcement director, Judge Meg Ryan, and no, not Meg Ryan from Sleepless in Seattle and Top Gun fame. Not that Meg Ryan. She's not resurfaced again. No, this is an appointee of President Bush back in 2006. Federal judge who is now an enforcement director. And she has publicly stated in her commentary, and Paul Atkins has echoed this, is they're going to focus on individual accountability.
Okay.
Individual wrongdoers, the bad actors. They're not looking to bring excessive actions against companies because the view is that that's going to negatively impact shareholders.
Okay.
And so they're going to focus on fraud, manipulation, insider trading, things like that are kind of the core to what the SEC does. They do that in any administration, but I don't think we will see the broad, cast a wide net that we saw in the last administration to kind of figure out what you can get. And we certainly saw some of those actions result in losses in court.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to focus on what do we know that we have, it's grounded in the federal securities laws, and we will prevail because they don't want to waste resources going after cases that they potentially will lose.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. So let's wrap up the SEC and consult our comment letter barometer.
Yes.
Any pressures building up there?
I think so. Yes. No, I think when I think about kind of that slide, certainly where segment reporting is and segments, I do see that rising like the tide.
Yeah.
So I could see that rising to a higher level. I think because we had an amendment, a change to the standard, there's obviously a heavy focus. Anytime that you have a change to a standard, a new rule that the SEC has adopted and they're now complying, the SEC staff's going to focus on it. And so I always advise companies, look, that's going to be the primary focus. It's almost like a compliance exercise, check the box, ensuring that you're complying with those disclosures. So I think we'll see that tick up a bit. I think there's some other areas. I think MD&A always is a big focus. Non-GAAP is going to be a big focus. Non-GAAP is one where I'd say you take a step back, ensure that you have controls and procedures over the non-GAAP disclosures. The importance of controls, we talk about this all the time. The importance of controls surrounding those disclosures are key, and being transparent, being consistent with what you're actually doing. So if I'm going to adjust for a certain line item, understand what's in that line item, the expense line item.
Yeah.
understand that that may include a bunch of other costs that maybe the SEC might consider to be recurring and maybe should not be part of an expense add back. So things like that to think about.
Okay, that's helpful. So that's the SEC. So let's quickly move on to the PCAOB. A new board. We don't have a new board in place. It's imminent, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I think we've heard, from Kurt Hall, who is the new SEC chief accountant. We've heard him talk about this as being a priority, focusing on the PCAOB. Obviously, got a lot of attention from the Hill. So I would say that the forecast, right? It's a bit stormy, and so I think it's going to be very interesting. And we've heard that they've solicited candidates, people to apply for the 5 board positions. Not sure whether the full board will be replaced, but there's no word yet. So I expect that will be happening soon. We will be hearing from the SEC, the PCAOB, and the FASB next week at the AICPA conference. So that's always an interesting session where you get to hear kind of current insights from the various regulators. But I think, look, as far as I think about just the accounting firms and what firms have said, what we've said publicly, look, I mean, our markets are the envy of the world, right? And so when you think about why we are that way, it is because of the strong, effective regulatory oversight. And so we have said, look, when you think about the PCAOB's mission, their focus is going to be they're doing inspections, they're doing standard setting enforcement. We as a firm, we have said publicly, we believe in strong enforcement inspections. And so those are the things that I think even Kurt Hall of the SEC has said, look, it's very important that the PCAOB remains. It's obviously not going to go away. Congress can't. Congress has to act on it to remove the PCAOB.
Yeah.
I think the budget will be cut. So that's going to be the impact. How does that impact their future operations?
Yeah.
It's just kind of stay tuned.
Okay. So thank you for that update. Let's move on to sustainability.
Yeah.
We've got a few minutes left, but a lot going on there, specifically California related. So companies were gearing up for California reporting. And then November 18, 2 big things happened. The first is that a federal appeals court basically paused the California law requiring companies to disclose their climate-related financial risks, so SB 261. But it's still allowed for greenhouse gas emissions reporting, so SB 253. So that was item number 1, so the pause of 261. But then the second thing that also happened on November 18 was that the California Air Resources Board held a public workshop, right? And there were some developments around SB 253 that came from there.
Right.
So what's happening? What's going on?
Yeah, look, I think you just think about the 2 requirements, right? It's climate risk disclosure. The second is GHG emissions, right? And so, the climate risk disclosure, it's on hold pending court review. Compliance is not required at this time. However, the situation can change, right? There is a court hearing that will take place in January of 2026. So companies do need to be prepared. They need to be paying attention to possible future requirements. The other piece is the GHG emissions reporting. And as you said, the California regulators clarified companies that are not gathering emissions data as of December 2024 can formally opt out of 2026 reporting of those GHG emissions. So those that do plan to report, so it's essentially can do so with or without assurance, third-party assurance over that. So I think that's something that, obviously legal counsel would need to be consulted. There's some nuances there we won't get into, but again, it's important for companies to be understanding the impacts in this change.
Yeah. And maybe just going back to 261, I mean, we're in December, reporting was required. Like, should companies just leave everything, abandon all efforts, or what should they do? I mean,
that's a loaded question. I mean, so I would say legal counsel likely is going to advise companies, right, with respect to reporting. I would say, though, if most companies have already gone down the path, just continue to go down that path, because that's going to put you in a better position. And as you said, who knows what's going to happen, right? And so if you're down the path already, I would say it probably makes sense to continue. get out the bugs, right? Get everything fixed in good shape. And so this is your dry run for real.
Yeah.
This is your chance. So I would say just move forward. Again, though, I think talk to counsel, right?
Oh, okay.
And it's probably the best advice I can give.
Okay, well, so we got through that. I think maybe the last thing to touch on, as you know, no discussion today is complete without AI. And so anything from a regulatory front that we should be thinking about in terms of AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, something that everyone's talking about. Even the SEC has talked about it. I think the first things you typically see from the SEC, and I think back to kind of the ESG, the greenwashing, right?
Yeah.
Saying you're doing something that you're not really doing. Saying you're selling a product or service that, you're kind of in the early stages, but you're, inflating kind of what you may or may not be doing. I think that same applies for AI, right? Generative AI washing, right? Is that something that you're comfortable with the disclosures that are in the filing? Because the SEC is going to ask.
Yeah.
They're going to probe. They want to understand what it is that you are actually using it for. How are you using it? Set aside the impacts of like the financials, right? If you're going to use it in your systems, your control environment, all of that. I think companies are not going down that path yet. But even when you think about just disclosures and filings about your offerings, that's something the SEC has been focused on. Whether it's the last administration, I think this administration will be as well.
Okay.
The other thing is, which I think is kind of in the background, which will impact, I believe, the SEC and what they're doing moving forward, is they do have a team, an AI task force. This is focused on how they can use generative AI across the various divisions and offices. So how can they do it in the review program, enforcement purposes? There's a lot of ways that they can use those tools. And they have data sets now, right? You have inline XBRL that you can actually use to feed some of these tools.
Yeah.
So I think it's paying attention. I think just keep in mind that that's going to happen. And so, the SEC is down that path. I think companies should be too.
Yeah. Kyle, this was very helpful. I think we covered a lot. I think we had like 18 minutes or so. And so I will close out and just say that with so many regulatory fronts rolling through, staying prepared is basically the best way for companies to not get caught in a compliance downpour.
No,
that's my last cheesy pun.
No, and I have one too.
You
don't get caught in the storm bunker. You pay attention to keep it, poke your head up to understand what the landscape looks like.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Kyle. And back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Tracy and Kyle. I got to admit, you nailed it, at least in the beginning. I don't think stand-up comedy is probably in either one of your futures. And if we were counting, you probably had more weather references and analogies than any other segment we've ever done before. So note to self, next time I need to sit in on your practice sessions. But there was a lot there. Unfortunately for you as directors, I think there's still uncertainty, even in the regulatory environment, although I would say that the trends appear to maybe be more clear or becoming more clear as we get into this term of President Trump and the administration. And on the sustainability front, I'm glad we finished with that. I think, one way to think about sustainability is are we focused on sustainability because it's integral to our strategy, or is it a compliance exercise? And for so many of you, you've made it a part of strategy. And so maybe it's less about what do the standards require and more about what are we doing and how do we want to be transparent about that message to the marketplace. So something certainly for you to think about. I should have known better, but I can't believe that we've already talked about AI twice in both of the segments. And so now we're going to get into a session that's fully devoted to AI. I don't think you can do one of these without it. Most of your companies have made AI a business issue. And whether you have or not, it's clearly beginning to trickle into the remit of the audit committee. So to lead us through a discussion is my colleague, Gregory. Mr. Johnson, the ball is yours.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And I'm here with Kimberly Ellison-Taylor, a board member, audit committee member, involved in technology with an accounting background. So the exact person to talk about AI, and we've hit it, as Stephen said, a couple of times in the first two segments. And it's all in the news cycle, AI. We hear a lot about it. It has a lot of different uses, but we want to kind of grind it down to the audit committee in this segment. So clearly there's a lot that can happen with AI, and there's a lot of productivity that can come about. But at a high level, from your perspective, how do you see AI currently trending as a tool for strategy and risk oversight?
So first of all, thank you, Gregory, for having me talk about audit committee and AI. But I have to say, as you well know, there are so many configurations of the audit committee. And I know that in some cases, technology and cybersecurity risk are sitting within audit committees. And depending on the sector, they're sitting in other places. So if you've met one audit committee, you've probably met one audit committee. Mm-hmm. But having said that, I would say AI has been around for several decades, but absolutely in the last 2 years, we seem to have heard a lot more about it, especially as it relates to the promise and transformation, and it's bigger than the internet. And I know that I have colleagues that when they hear words like that they automatically kick into their professional skepticism, as well they should. But I do think there are some benefits as we move from curiosity into capability and strategic capacity. So as it relates to your question, I think that AI is helping us to accelerate our strategy. And at the same time, it's helping us enhance our risk management frameworks. And so let's just talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. In many cases, from a strategic standpoint, we're talking about disciplined expense management. We're talking about new market opportunities. We're talking about how to grow the top and the bottom line. And so can AI help us be more forward-looking? Absolutely. From the other perspective of risk oversight, can AI help us with sensing more things, customer behavior, macro trends, operations? Absolutely. There's a difference between predictive AI and anticipation of the things that I just mentioned. Prediction is simply looking at history and the things we've done to come up with what probably will happen based on what has already happened. That's great. But the higher order, which will help us in risk management, is looking at macro areas, things that haven't even happened, and providing anticipation to the board and to management on how to more effectively manage risk before they occur. So I do think that there's a lot going on with monitoring of risk, automating those functions, getting in front of processes, and helping us from a strategy and risk perspective, growing top and bottom line.
Wonderful. That's a good take there, Kimberly. So there's a lot of uses for AI. You got the productivity aspect of it. You have operational, big ticket items for companies. It seems to me that there's a tone at the top that needs to happen for AI adoption within the organization, and of course within the governance structure as well. So what are some ways for the audit committee to work more effectively with management so that they get the support from an oversight of AI perspective?
I think we all need to be on the same page. So we need clarity. Who's responsible for AI? What are the AI risks? What are the opportunities? What are our competitors doing? What are the regulations? And so we need clarity. But even more than that, we need change in leadership. Because with that clarity means we need to communicate it to the organization. People are afraid. They're scared. They're hearing in the media they're either going to lose their jobs or it's going to reshape their jobs. So our communication strategies have to be around how we keep humans in the loop, as you well know, and how we help with judgment from an AI perspective, and not just think that people are going to be replaced wholesale because of AI. Now, that clarity and that communication and change leadership also means going a step, I would say one more step in. We talk about reskilling, skilling, and upskilling. Well, now it's time to say what those roles will be, because without that clarity, people will be afraid. They won't go all in. We won't reap the benefits. When we're trying to figure out why haven't we gotten the benefits of AI, it's because people have still kept 50% of the role, and they gave 50% of it to the AI agent, when in most cases, they needed to give at least 90% to the AI agent, kept the variance and kept the insight and judgment part, so that's more of a complement, free that person up to do some more high value things, and so we can move forward. So that change at the top also means capacity for change. We have to stagger it in. We can't change every single thing all at the same time because people get fatigued with change and they get tired. And so then AI becomes this bad word when we don't want it to be something that people are dreading. We want our team members to anticipate, look forward to it, and work with us, management and the board, to figure out how we can do even more in the future.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we hear a lot from audit committee members is the aspect of culture and having that culture within the organization, tone at the top, from management, walking the talk, using AI, having governance around it as well. And typically, the audit committee does not own oversight of AI. That's typically the full board. But even if the audit committee doesn't own oversight of AI and broadly, AI can touch just about every area under the audit committee's responsibilities. So given that backdrop, what are some things that audit committee members ought to consider and understand in their role as they think about AI oversight?
And I couldn't agree with you more, because AI is going to touch every committee. And when you think about all the functions of let's just take, if there's a typical audit committee, I don't know that there is, but deterring fraud, financials, internal controls, financial statements, ethics and compliance, internal audit, external audit, risk management in some cases. It absolutely will touch all of those functions. So people, processes, and technology. How does this impact the internal controls of the organization? How does this impact what we communicate to our investors and to analysts? How do we ensure that we're not AI washing, that we have transparency and realism, and we can go out and see what our competitors and people who are best in class with using technology, what they're doing as well. And so I would say from an audit committee, we have to use AI. Now, I know some of my colleagues are like, Kimberly, what are you talking about? But I think we have to play around with it, not with our board materials. Let me just say that, not with our board materials. We're going to be in lockstep with the corporate secretaries. We're not going to upload any of these materials at all. We don't know how they're secured out in these various systems. So we'll rely on the corporate secretary to let us know. But that doesn't mean we can't do experimentation, but we can't do our own research, that we can't go to industry podcasts, webcasts, conferences, things that you produce. You have a great article out there right now, AI oversight in the age of for the audit committee.
Yes.
I think that's very helpful. And I think just reading and being a lifelong learner is exactly what the audit committee should do, because then we need to do a constructive challenge. We are there to look at strategy, risk, performance, and the integrity of the internal controls and the financial statements. We're not able to do that job if we don't understand how technology and AI shows up across the organization. So from a model risk, bias, drift perspective, we need to know when something goes right. We need to know when something goes wrong, and do the systems in place tell us when those things happen.
Well, you gave us a lot there, and also not only the different aspects of AI, but the different stakeholders for the audit committee. And one of those stakeholders that I think could be a very good support for the audit committee is internal audit. So let's just talk about internal audit for a minute. What are some ways in which internal audit or the audit committee can use internal audit as support from an AI perspective?
Well, what I can really appreciate is that the Institute of Internal Auditors just redid all of their standards. And so internal audit committees across the spectrum have really started looking already at how they operate, the things that they do, how they support the organization as an advisor, consulting, or doing their core audit functions. So they're looking at business risk, and I love them because they are our eyes and ears on the ground. It means that they should be leveraging AI. They should be looking at dynamic audit planning and methodology so that they can be more efficient and effective, using tools and resources that will help them help the organization. And then at the same time, we're counting on them helping the organization from who's in charge? What are the internal controls? Every time we implement some new process or some new technology, there's jeopardy to the internal control environment. We also need to understand what vendors are we using? Do we have a concentration risk? Is the organization resilient? And very importantly, do we have quality data? Because you can't have good AI without good BI. And so we have to have someone that can look at the data architecture and data governance. Now, the technology organization is expanding. I have been a CIO in my past career. And so we know CIO, Chief Technology Officer, we have the CISOs, we have the Chief Data Officer, we have the Chief Digital Officer. And so we need someone who can help us navigate across all of these domains in a way that's concise, cohesive, focused on risk, and also how it aligns to the strategy. And we rely a lot on internal audit to help us do that.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about using internal audit in different ways from a culture perspective as part of the assessment process. And I think these are great opportunities to kind of continue to think about internal audit and AI and how do you expand the effectiveness of internal audit for the audit committee. So let's bridge a little bit down the path of ways in which management, because we need management support as an audit committee as we go down this path of AI. So how can management help to support the audit committee in its oversight of AI?
Bring us in early. On the pilots, if there's an AI inventory, if there's a AI model risk, if there are heavy, high prioritized processes that use a lot of AI, especially as it relates to forecasting, to SOX, to the financial statements. Let us know what vendors are leveraging AI and how does that potentially impact the roles that we play. We have to ask those questions. And I would encourage my colleagues, don't ask them one time, because the pace of change is moving so quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think we can sound like a broken record to simply say, is there risk to leveraging this new solution? How does this show up inside the organization? Do we have the right people working on this? Do we have the capacity to do this? And if you ask it in one quarter, then you might need to ask it a different way the next quarter. But I think we all have to keep our eyes on the ball, and management can give us governance processes that they're using to govern. Multiple organizations will have committees that have specific oversight across transformation. Lots of people are using AI as a tool for transformation, which is in your first question, I appreciate, because it is a tool. AI is not the solution. AI is an enabler to enable the strategy, the risk management, and the performance. And so to the extent that management can bring the audit committee along and help us help them with credible, challenging questions, I think we can come together, and I think the leadership will get what they need from us, because we should be thought partners in the sense of we're pushing and asking key questions to help the organization from an overarching perspective, in addition to just our responsibilities.
Yeah, really appreciate you using the phrase thought partner, because it's a partnership between the board and management in sometimes a challenging, transparent way. But there's going to be a lot for audit committees to think about and to learn. And you touched a little bit earlier on continuous lifelong learning, and I'm a big advocate of that. And so I wanted to ask you, how will audit committee members stay current? What are some of the things that they should be thinking about as they go down this path?
I think there's a lot out in, I would say, the social media world and in news on what people should know. But from an audit committee perspective, we have seasoned professionals, been there, done it professionals. They would use this as a same format, maybe amplified, on how they've handled risk in the past. We've been through transformational changes. They need to amplify that by increasing their own knowledge of what AI is, how the architecture works, how do you secure it, what happens if something goes wrong, how do the processes get escalated, how much is it going to cost? And I will tell you, from my vantage point, that if we spend, and it's not a trivial amount, we're going to have to invest in the people, the processes, and technology to see benefits. And when it gets overhyped, then people start thinking, wow, we haven't seen anything. Well, it's really only been 3 months. We've only been doing it for a year. It's going to take some time, but we can't spend all the money on the technology and solutions and then spend $10 on training people. That training process and bringing people along is going to have to start early. So from an audit committee perspective, we're going to have to brush off our change leadership skills. So we're going to have to talk about how we can bring people along on the journey. We're going to have to experiment. We're going to have to go to the conferences. We're going to sit through technology sessions, not to be a technologist like me. I'm also a qualified financial expert, but you don't have to be a master of technology. You need to have literacy and fluency in technology so that you can understand how the architecture works, the opportunities, the challenges, and the risk.
Yeah, and you get that from continuous lifelong learning, staying current, because as I talk with boards and audit committee members, you have to become expert in asking good questions.
Exactly. And we know how to do that.
Yes.
Yes, we know how to do that.
So I have a bonus question for you as we close here. Is there one thing that you could leave our audience with in terms of one takeaway, a nugget? We've talked about a lot here today. In terms of where companies are at, how audit committees are using AI, et cetera. What is a nugget that you could leave our audience with?
So many things, but here's what I would say. I definitely think we need clarity. We need to communicate, have change leadership, and ensure the organization has the capability. Yep. Did we invest in reducing tech debt? Did we ensure that we have the right solutions? Do we have a digital first or innovation mindset? Do we promote responsible risk-taking inside the organization? So there are some preliminary things that have to be in place before we can scale AI. And I would hope that our colleagues would recognize that we're going to need grace. We're not always going to get it right. The management team's not going to get it right. We're moving at the pace of change, and we're going to have to work together and recognize that AI is not the solution. It enables the strategy, and it is a tool that will benefit the organization long term.
Oh, well, thank you, Kimberly. A lot of great perspectives that our audience will appreciate. And thank you for being with us here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Stephen, back to you.
Thank you, Gregory. And thank you, Kimberly. So much in that short segment. I like the way Kimberly summed things up. A couple things that I thought were really valuable and worth repeating is she talked about how important communication and leadership was. And I would just add that what we've done in the past doesn't work in the future. So that's got to continue to evolve. And she challenged board members. She challenged her colleagues that you need to be experimenting with AI so that you can have a feel for it and it'll give you a better opportunity just to be able to challenge management and see how you can take advantage of that tool. She also talked about internal audit. Much more to come there. Hang on, my producer is saying we've got some breaking news. Dang it. I don't know why. I can't find anything that's really breaking news. I was hoping we could. I know Kyle called something out as that, but so I apologize about that. But I will tell you, at least we're being honest about it. Compared to our competitors in the news business who want to say every hour that there's something breaking when it's really the same story over and over again, and often not just a story but an opinion. We bring you perspectives here, breaking or not. How about that? So now I want to move into a broader discussion on a few of the other challenges that are facing audit committees today. And to help me do that, I've invited Stephen O'Hearn, a board chair and a retired PwC partner, to join me in that conversation. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Sorry I couldn't get back to New York for this conversation live.
Hey, I know that you were wrestling with this. So Steve is in Wisconsin, and we're all familiar with the weather challenges we've had. But the good news is that we've got some great tools and agility and flexibility, and we're still able to have this conversation. So thanks for making it work out, and we're really glad to have you. We've talked a lot in the earlier segments about some of the challenges that are facing companies and boards today, whether it's around economics, geopolitics, around regulation, or even evolving technologies like AI. I just want to start out our conversation by asking you, as a board chair, what keeps you up at night, Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on something that Natalie alluded to earlier in this webcast about what concerns me the most is threats to the global business environment in favor of nationalistic tendencies. The U.S. has long been the leader in facilitating a global business environment whereby goods and services are produced in the lowest cost markets and sold in the markets of highest demand, irrespective of borders. And tremendous economic value endured to this country over the last 50 years or so in that leadership role. We can have a debate certainly about how fairly that economic worth was distributed within this country, but I would much rather have had us be having that conversation than perhaps exhibiting behaviors that prematurely cede our leadership role. Now, there is an element of inevitability, I think. It's not a sustainable long-term notion that a country with only 5% of the global population would be the economic leader in perpetuity. China, with 25% of the global population, is probably poised to play the role in the 21st century that the US played in the 20th century. But I reflect on this as we think about our strategies of the companies we serve. We're planning for an environment that will look much different than the environment that we as board members grew up in over the course of our professional careers, and over the course, and it'll look different than the environment today. None of this is going to happen quickly, but I do think that we have to have an eye on the future as we go forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that big picture view, and I think as a board chair, I can understand where you're coming from, and things certainly are different. And with changing circumstances comes risk and also opportunity. And as we engage with audit committee members over the course of the year, it seems like no matter our initial topic, we always seem to navigate to the importance of management's own enterprise risk process. Even Kimberly alluded to that earlier. And so, given that boards have the responsibility for oversight of strategy and risk, as you just said, how do you see these two areas going hand in hand? How important is risk assessment for you? And how do you see your audit committees engaging differently with management in this area? And I know that you sit, on an FS company, so maybe it's a different committee, but for a lot of our audience, audit committees often have that responsibility.
Yeah, no, okay. Listen, first of all, monitoring risk and monitoring the execution of the strategy are very closely interlinked, okay? And you are right, the financial services companies tend to have risk committees, investment committees. In the non-FS world, the audit committee has a much broader risk mandate over both sides of the balance sheet: operational risk, often cyber risk, AI risks, as Kimberly was just discussing. But I think it's in so much of the thoughtfulness around the execution of the strategy happens at the board level. Those audit committee members need to bring their risk voice to that board level discussion. As you're talking about, do we have the right metrics in place to incent management behaviors in alignment with the shareholders and other stakeholders? Are we allocating capital to the right opportunities? Most boards have a simple 2x2 matrix where they plot ROE and growth potential to ensure that capital is allocated to the right quadrants. Bringing a risk perspective to those types of conversations is really important. Is the target operating model scalable for growth? There's a lot of discussion about whether companies should have global systems or local systems. Global systems tend to be much more efficient. Local systems tend to be much more customer-centric. What's the right balance? And I think that are the enablement functions adequately deep and prepared to support the scalability of the business? This is where, when you get into assessing whether or not an enablement function like finance is capable to support the growth of the business, the role of the audit committee is critical. The audit committee knows the depth of the finance function much better than non-audit committee members. So I do think that bringing that voice to the board's strategy conversation is really important. And obviously, like in any conversation around strategy, what should be stopped? Okay, what is consuming time? What is consuming capital? That is not in the long term accretive to the company. That needs to be thought through and curtailed.
Kimberly alluded to kind of risks around the corner in her discussion. So I want us to go quickly to, as board chair, you're interacting with all of your committee chairs. And when I meet with audit committee chairs, they often share with me how their agendas have just become overwhelming in terms of the things that they've got to cover. And they feel like they've got less time for dealing with some of these unexpected matters that may come up. So as you're engaging with your committee chairs and as you're thinking about your own board agenda, what are your views on agenda overload? What are the things that you're seeing that can protect against that and allow the committee, the board to deal with the things that they really need to deal with?
I mean, I think the key to efficient meetings, whether it be board meetings or committee meetings, Stephen, is that well thought through, concise, clear pre-reads provided to the board members with sufficient time to come prepared and have a discussion at the meeting. The most efficient board meetings are meetings that are discussions of the topics that have been presented in the pre-reads. There's nothing more inefficient than a board watching a management team scroll through a PowerPoint presentation. So I really think that even when the board meetings are efficient, you've got to make tough calls as to what gets on the agenda and what doesn't. But I think it's a lot easier conversation and a lot easier to adjudicate that question when the meetings themselves are efficient.
And I couldn't agree more with you on that. And I suspect maybe just as a follow-up there, in terms of responsibility for the agendas, you're asking your committee chairs to clearly be involved in that process.
I mean, I think that's really the board chair and the committee chairs have to set the agendas for their meetings, obviously in close concert with management. Obviously, the management team is closest to the issues, but the board chair and the committee chairs need to be connected throughout the period leading up to a board meeting as to what the most important topics on the mind of the liaisons are to ensure there's sufficient time on the agenda for the topics of greatest import. But ultimate responsibility for the agenda belongs with the chair and the board chair and committee chairs. And if there's insufficient time, we've got to create it. We don't meet frequently enough to give important topics less than a full conversation. And that can get challenging, but I do think it's really important that the board leaders have authority over the agendas to ensure sufficient time is given to the matters that matter most.
I love that comment. Hey, we've only got about a minute left or so, Steve. You've given us several things to think about as our audience thinks about preparing for year end and even beyond. So how about just a takeaway or two that you'd like to leave with our audience?
I would just go back to the conversation that started this webcast an hour ago around sustainability reporting. I would really encourage audit committee members to be mindful of what the control environment looks like around the non-financial data. Okay, some of it's easy, HR related data, but some of it, greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 footprint, is not so easy. And you really want to ensure that the control environment matures as the expectations around frequency and assurance level on reporting matures. I spent a good chunk of the latter years of my career with this firm in Europe reporting on the early days of sustainability reporting. And it was
so
a
I moved
heavy
to
lift.
execute the
Now, the regulators were very accommodating because
disbursement
the
agreement
assurance
with the
was
Port of
quite
Benton
limited.
for
But-
use of
but
rural
in the
county
world
capital
we're living
funds
in
toward the
now,
Northwest
where expectations are
Intermodal
rising,
project.
audit committee members need to really ask the
I'll
tough
second that
questions about
motion.
what does
All
this
those in favor
control
say
environment
aye.
look like. It's naturally not what the control environment around financial data looks like.
Motion passes.
We've been reporting on
Okay.
that for 100 years.
Adam,
and
next.
planning on that control environment.
Yep,
for
got
20.
the second one
But I
for
do
you. Now
think
this
that,
is in Benton
um,
City.
We are beyond
And
the
this is
infancy in
the
this control
upgrade of the
environment
two
and
lift
non-financial
stations,
data
4 and
needs to be
5 out there,
controlled.
and the associated generators.
That's very well said,
We've
Steve.
done
Thank you so
a few
much
of these
for your
projects with the city of Benton
contributions,
City
your
before.
perspectives today. I know it's going to be
These
important
old
to our
lift
audience.
stations they're antiquated,
for
they're
having me.
underpowered for water and
So now
sewage
I want to move to
circulation.
our
So
final
it's sort of a
segment.
barrier for
Last
them
week, my
to
colleague Katie
successfully
Hall
commercialize
sat down
some of
with
the
chief audit
properties in the city.
executive and an audit committee chair
The
to
rural
talk about
county
ways that companies are looking
contribution
at
would
evolving
be up to
internal audit to
1.4
be more
million, but
valuable.
actually be less than that
Let's roll
because
that
this
video.
project was originally
Thank you,
ARPA funded.
Stephen. Today,
And the time
we
frame
are going to be
stretched out that
talking
we
about
lost the
how
opportunity to do it
internal
entirely
audit
with ARPA funds.
is
So they've
transforming
spent
at one organization,
about a third of the money so
particularly through
far.
the use
We're
of
not able to do it with
AI.
ARPA
So
anymore.
here
So
with
the
me
back
today
fall
to
for
talk
that
about
was to go to
Mary
rural county,
Coleman
which
and
is
Gina
what
Adelphia.
we're now trying to
Larry
do.
is a seasoned board member and former
And I
executive
just
of
also
Phoenix, currently serves
note
on the
that
boards of Taxaware
we're
Technologies,
working with Benton
Booking
City
Holdings,
kind of
Inc.,
specifically to try to
ServiceNow, and
identify
James
some
Three of the
better
audit committee
projects
chair.
for them.
In
We've had a
addition,
hard
Larry
time
serves on a
finding
number
projects
of
that
private
work for Benton
company
City that
boards.
qualify for rural
Gina
county.
is the chief audit executive
We've
at
they've had a
the
few
Clayton
ideas
South
and those just
local
for whatever
government. So
reason
happy
haven't
you're
really been
here.
able to qualify.
Thank
So
you. It's good to
we're
be
putting
here.
in a little extra effort to
Let's
try to
start with
work
the
with
basic
Benton City to
question.
see if
When
we
you
can
hear,
help them
Gina, when
along
you
with some
hear
meaningful
the words
projects to use
internal
rural
audit
county for.
transformation,
In the
what does
meantime,
that mean to
we
you?
have this
And
project and
how
I
do you
can
think
try to
about
answer
that?
any
Why
other
is it
questions that you have.
important in your role as a chief audit executive?
I don't have any questions.
For me,
Okay,
and even
great.
more
You
broadly
wanna
as an
read the motion,
internal
please,
audit
then?
leader,
Yeah.
it's really
I move
about
to
ensuring our
move to
functions keep
execute the
pace with modern
disbursement
business
agreement with the
practices.
city
The
of
speed
Benton
in which the
City
world is
for use
operating
of rural
today,
county
and
capital
even
funds
the speed
toward
in which
the lift station
threats
4 and 5
continue to
upgrades
emerge
and
around us.
generators project.
And so that means that we
Second that.
continue
All
to
those in favor
ask
say aye.
ourselves and challenge
Aye.
ourselves.
Those
Are we
opposed, nay. The
staying
ayes have it. Motion
relevant
passes.
and even
Thanks, Adam.
influential in
Thank you.
advancing
Thanks, Adam.
practices that help our
Any other business,
stakeholders and management
Commissioner
really
McKay?
protect the organizations we serve?
We do have another item.
So when
Yeah,
I think about
Commissioner.
it, transformation
Okay.
really starts with taking
Miss
an honest
Miss
look
Carly
at
Nave, come on
where we're at,
down.
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry. I
And
got the
that
agenda
can
back up.
mean
Missed that
sometimes
one.
starting from scratch.
That's
and
okay.
completely reimagining how we do
Thank
things.
you, Commissioner. So
And
today what I
then
have
from
for your
there, you gotta
consideration
have a
is
clear
a
vision
telecommuting
on
policy.
where you want to go and how
The
you're going to get there
county
as a
had
team.
adopted an
But I
emergency
think about
resolution in 2020
transformation, and I
for
think
obvious
about
reasons for
people to a
telecommuting, and
certain
we
extent,
haven't had
because
a
you have to let go of
regular
some
policy in
legacy
place since that
practices in
point.
order to
Several
really
elected officials
make
had
things
expressed a
take
desire
hold
to
and
put a policy
embrace
in
the
place,
technology that we have
obviously
before
geared
us. So
mostly
it can be
towards
a really
exempt
energizing experience,
overtime
not
exempt
only
employees,
for
but also
yourself
for the
as a
purposes
leader,
of
but for
disability
your entire
accommodation when
team
those
and the
things
folks
come
you
up.
work with.
So the proposed
Absolutely.
policy has
And as
received
you said,
input from
this
all
topic
department
of
heads and
transformation, we
elected
hear it
officials,
all
and
over
all
the
of the
place, but
electeds
it
have
really
signed the
can
final
be
product.
something that
Happy to
brings
answer any
new life
questions.
into different
Any
functions
questions,
within the group, including
Commissioner McKay?
internal audit. So
No, I
Larry,
don't have
I'd
any. I
love to
just
hear from
appreciate
you
how there's
in
no
your
fiscal
role as audit
impact. So
committee chair and
how
as
we're
an
making
audit
this all
committee
work
member at other
and everything.
boards.
So I
When you
appreciate
think
it.
about internal
Yeah,
audit and
any
what that
telecommuting
transformation looks
arrangements
and
per
feels
the
like,
policy are
how is
required
that
to come
important in
from
your role as an
budgeted
audit
funds if
committee
there
member?
is any impact.
It is really important. And
Cool.
Can I make a motion?
Yes.
Function, the role.
Okay, I move to
internal
approve the
audit
Benton
is
County
critical, I believe, to good governance.
telecommunicating
I
policy
think about
and
it in
rescind
two
resolution
ways. One is, how do we
2020-587.
strengthen the internal audit function?
Second
And the
that.
second is,
All
how do
those
we
in favor say
strengthen
aye.
the company?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Nay.
from
Okay, the
an
motion
internal
passes.
audit
Thank you.
perspective,
Okay,
you.
now,
Just
is
a
there any
number
other
of
business, Commissioner McKay, do you have anything?
challenges that
Um,
the organization
we don't have any
faces
staff-wise.
as
We don't have any, but no, I
think about
appreciate. Sorry, I
transformation,
couldn't
which
make
is
it
a
last
word we use a lot.
meeting during Thanksgiving
There are a
week just
number of
because
ways
where I
we
was
can
at had bad
strengthen
cell
the
service. So,
organization. Gina
but I'm
talked
glad to be
about
back in
the use of
action.
Technology, for example.
Uh,
we'll talk.
Administrator
about AI and
McPherson,
how we
anything?
create additional insight.
Nothing
There's
from staff.
always this hunger for more
Anyone
insight,
there?
more
Can you tell me
value,
if Ross or any other
more
electeds,
ability to
Commissioner
see
McKay,
around
want to say
corners and
anything?
strengthening the organization.
No,
truly
Mr.
understand,
Spencer's taking a nap, so we don't
our
wake him
Okay.
up.
business and truly understand
Okay.
our processes and be
Well,
able
We're
with
good.
that, nothing
create an
having
audit
to come
environment
before the board,
that
I'll
strengthens
adjourn the meeting now
not
at
just the
9:18.
organization, but the
Thanks everyone
enterprise
for
itself becomes
participating,
important.
and have a good
So
rest of the week.
using that insight
Thanks, Rome.
to
Thank
really
you.
help
Bye.
management understand where to focus, where to mitigate risks, how to mitigate risks, so that we end up not just with a transformed internal audit function, but a transformed enterprise as well.
I love that you said that, because yes, it's about internal audit transformation and the value that Gina and any internal audit organization is going to bring to the company, but it's twofold. It really is. It's internal audit, but then it's the value that it brings to the entire organization. So I love that you really pulled the thread on that. All right. So we've talked around AI. No discussion these days seems complete, whether it's in the boardroom, outside of the boardroom, in your personal professional lives, without talking about AI. I hear from audit committees as well as chief audit execs and other executives. We talk about the risks, but then there's also the upside and the strategic opportunities that use of AI brings. And so when we think about using AI to drive internal audit transformation, Gina, what are some of the specific ways that you've done that? And how is internal audit now delivering value to the business through AI?
Sure. So I'm fortunate enough to work in an organization where we have the tools available to us, right? And so our organization supports innovation and even experimentation with those tools. And so in 2025, in particular, we've built a number of individual use cases, but now we're at the point where we are going beyond those individual use cases. And we've implemented some practices that are now part of our core processes. And we've adopted the motto through all of this, right, of AI generated, human validated, but we're putting those individual successes together to really compound the value that we not only bring ourselves, but those insights that we bring to the business and to those stakeholders as well. We're calling it the year of assurance intelligence. And so let me just give you a couple examples. We've created this concept of starter kits, if you will, where we use a variety of tools, AI and some others, and we take all the information our stakeholders give us, we put it through something like a RAD model, and we create these pretty thorough white papers of the functions that we're auditing. We will also do things like process flows, the current ones as well as strengthened ones in terms of analyzing the controls, questions that we give our auditors. So all of this combined really establishes an entire new category of value. And then there's other categories as well. Like you think about the RCTM, which is a risk and control test matrix. In the internal audit world, that's kind of like the motherboard of the audit, right? And that itself used to take us almost 4 weeks to do. Now it's down to 4 hours. And so it's really, really transformative. And the underpinning of all of that are the standards, are the Institute of Internal Auditing standards. And so we've got those built into the processes. And all of that leads to more insight that we can provide our stakeholders. And we're happy to share that insight, right? And give them a basis of which to improve and a basis of which to evolve their organizations. Again, all really exciting, Katie.
Oh, absolutely. And fun facts for everybody. I started my career in internal audit, and I used to spend weeks on an RCTO. So I think now of the value that an internal audit organization, when you're not spending weeks on those pieces of the process, you're able to deliver more value to the organization and spend time where it's really valuable throughout the organization. So that's incredible and exciting to be a part of, I'm sure. So Larry, I'm going to turn to you. How, in your role in the audit committee, how have you helped shape this journey, or how have you been along for the ride as Gina has transformed? How are you seeing that value?
It's an important journey at the Audit and Risk Committee. We've been thinking a lot about AI in the enterprise. So we've had a number of presentations around how we use AI for competitive advantage, but also how we use AI for productivity gains. And Gina and I have talked very specifically about the AI program in internal audit as being a really important use case. So we've seen tangible results for AI in internal audit from a productivity perspective. Gina can actually point to increased capacity per person in the organization as a result of AI, and that's a tremendous outcome. It really allows us to do more with the same number of people. But even more importantly than doing more with the same number of people, we can actually do better with the same number of people. Because you take some of the grunt work out of it, because you can accelerate the creation of some of these artifacts, you actually have time to create the kind of value that the enterprise hungers for. Before you spent all of your time just trying to generate the art, generate the reports, go through it. And now you can have a tool that really helps you do that and really sit back and say, how does this add value? How does this add create insight for the enterprise? And that's where I think AI truly helps us. It's almost a trifecta. It makes the job better, it creates better output, and strengthens the enterprise.
I like that. So it's not just do more, but it's do better. So it's a catchphrase from today's segment. All right. So we all know AI is powerful. It's definitely not a magic wand, though. Gina, you already said it. Human validation is a big piece of it. There's still a lot of human work, human validation, and judgment when we're using AI. So, Gina, I'd be curious to know, what are some of the general challenges that you've had when putting AI to work with internal audit? And how did you leverage the audit committee, if needed, in this journey?
Yeah. So at first, as you can imagine, it was the speed to adoption, right? Getting people comfortable to use the tools that were available to us. And while a little bit of that still lingers, I think we've come a long way, right? So technology can do a lot of the heavy lifting, but it really takes people to be comfortable in changing the behavior of the people to let go a bit and let the technology do its job. And so one small example I can give you is in internal audit, people often don't think that it's as writing intensive as what it is, and it's very heavy writing. And so the propensity, so to speak, is to draft something first and have AI polish it up. We're trying to reverse that and say, don't invest the time and spend it on writing a first draft. Let the technology do that. And so part of the challenge comes in changing some of those old habits and giving them time to adopt and measuring that progress along the way. And then in terms of leveraging, like the audit committee, Larry and I speak all the time, and he is a strong supporter of our function and really helps us think through how we can always get better. You know, we've been very transparent in terms of how we're using the technology, the choices that we're making to invest, and how we scale. And so I would say the audit committee as a whole has been not only supportive, but have helped us think through how we can get the most of it.
No, that's great. And I want to piggyback the next question on something you said. I mean, there's the changing of the old behaviors, and the technology around AI is constantly evolving and really requires upskilling from everyone who's touching it, whether you're overseeing it or whether you're using it. So the next question I'm going to have is a two-part around upskilling. So maybe Larry, I'll start with you. In your role on the audit committee and broadly on other, boards and other committees, how do you think of a director's role in terms of getting that additional upskilling? What are some ways that you find they're successful in seeking additional education around AI?
The first is internal education, management doing education of the board. And that's one I don't want to gloss over. I think a lot of the really important education of the board comes from management. Management is really focused on topics like AI and implementation within the context of the enterprise, and getting that education to the board becomes hugely important. The second, board conferences. This is where you learn from other people, the hallway conversations. I actually find it really energizing and truly important to talk to other people who are in the midst of doing this. And the third is formal education. There are a number of important avenues for getting individual formal education that makes sense. And finally, there are certifications that one can do from recognized organizations. And I think going down one or more of those paths becomes really important in upskilling ourselves as directors and committee members.
And that's really helpful. And there really are, to your point, a variety of ways to get there. So Gina, turning to you, same question, as a little bit of a different spin. You've probably had to look at upskilling your own team as you've taken on more transformation with AI. What does that look like? What is the skill set of an auditor in your team these days?
Yeah, so the common thread for our current and future hires is really a very strong data and or technology skill set. There's really no other way to think about the function these days, because that technology is going to continue to underpin everything we do. Now, of course, we round that out, right? So we continue to look for a well-rounded composition with data folks, process engineers, CPAs, things like that. But you can't really replace understanding what technology can do for the function as well as the organization. So that's really become front and center for us.
Great. And unfortunately, we are running out of time. As always, with a great conversation, this happens quite quickly. So Gina, Larry, I'd love to get your last minute parting words of advice for audit committee members, for CAEs who are thinking about undergoing an internal audit transformation, particularly use of AI. Any last minute words that you might pass on? Larry, I'll start with you.
Get started would be, would be my immediate answer. More seriously, I would say this particular topic of AI has so many nuances and so many challenges. The whole issue of, is the data right? Are we training correctly? Do our people understand it? Do we have to have a good training model? There's so many things. But really just putting it in perspective and getting started becomes really important, because you could boil the ocean and a year later not gotten anything done. That a clear focus on, let's get started. We will learn as we go. It won't be perfect the first time out of the gate, but we'll keep perfecting it, becomes an important approach to it.
That's absolutely right. Getting started and taking some action is certainly better than doing nothing. Gina, what about you? Any last minute words?
Yeah, I would echo those comments. In addition, I would say recognize the potential and the limitations to the technology, but don't be afraid to rethink, right? And reimagine how you can do things and add even new levels of value to the organizations.
That's all that we have time for today. Thank you, Gina and Larry, for your time and for your insights. We truly appreciate it. All right, back to you all in the studio.
What a great conversation they had. And maybe I'll just say, I know Larry said get started, and I know most of you are saying get finished. But clearly the partnership that came out between the audit committee chair and the chief audit executive there. And I think that's critical. So hey, our game plan was executed mostly as planned. But just like in today's governance environment, we planned to be agile and to expect the unexpected. And we did. But before we sign off, I wanted to share with you a final locker room message. As many of you know, I'll be retiring on June 30 of 2026. So this is my last webcast in this role. It's been a blessing to be invited into your companies over the last 5 years, and I've learned so much from you along the way. As any effective board knows, succession planning is critical to sustainability, and in the Governance Insight Center, we've leaned into that best practice. So while I'm not going anywhere in the immediate future, you'll begin to see much more of my friend and partner, Kathy Nealon, as she's agreed to join our governance team and lead our services to audit committees. Kathy, your client service background and your numerous leadership roles across the firm asset for not only our audit committee stakeholders, but also for our team. And those audit committee members, that audience, and are certainly in good hands with you as the new head coach. I want to be the first to say congratulations.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate that. So I could not be more excited to join this group. As you know, as a client service partner, I've been an avid user of our thought leadership and survey results. So they've been extremely helpful for me in delivering the best we can as a firm. I'm also super, super excited for you. Okay. I'm super proud of you, partner. Okay. We've worked together for more than 25 years. And I don't think either of us would have thought of each other sitting here in New York one day in these roles. Okay. And so very excited for you and your lovely wife as you transitioned. And I'm also thinking, Stephen, we might have missed an opportunity here. So as we follow the news and the headlines of all these head coaching positions, so you're the outgoing coach and I'm the new head coach. I think we missed an opportunity to negotiate our salaries here. So.
I think for sure we did miss an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Live and learn.
Yes.
You can do it better the next time. So our 2-minute drill ends with another touchdown. Thanks again for making time in your schedule to invest in us. We appreciate you. Happy holidays, everyone.